Hello BookTube. Today I'm going to be giving you my review of Goldfinger by Ian Fleming, which was published in 1959. It is the seventh of the original James Bond books, and I read this as a part of a general reread I'm doing of those books, which consist of 12 novels and 2 collections of short stories. Goldfinger opens with James Bond waiting in Miami airport for a flight to New York, where he can then fly from New York to London. He has just finished a mission in Mexico where he has had to destroy a heroin smuggling operation, and he has left a bad taste in his mouth. He's morose about it. He's questioning himself about why he did the mission. At the same time, he's sort of kicking himself, saying he shouldn't be saying things like this. As this is going on, Bond then hears that his flight to New York has been cancelled, and so he decides that he's going to spend the overnight stay in Miami, sort of enjoying himself, sort of knocking out the sort of sour taste and moroseness that he got over the Mexican mission before he returns to London. As he's deciding on what to do, he's approached by Mr. Dupont, who was one of the card players at Casino Royale when Bond faced off against Le Chiffre. Mr. Dupont asks Bond help. Mr. Dupont owns a hotel in Miami, which he has been visiting, and during his visit, he has been playing canasta against a naturalised British subject and millionaire called Ulrich Goldfinger. However, Goldfinger has been consistently winning a hell of a lot of money off Mr. Dupont in a manner which, if you're playing canasta straight, you cannot do. So Mr. Dupont is convinced that Goldfinger is cheating, but he can't work out how. So he offers Bond a free stay at the hotel and $10,000 in exchange for working out how Goldfinger's doing it. Bond accepts on the condition that even if he hasn't found, on the condition that Bond has to be back in London within 48 hours. So if by tomorrow evening Bond hasn't discovered how Goldfinger's cheating, Bond still has to leave. Mr. Dupont agrees and they go to the hotel. The next morning, Bond is introduced to Goldfinger as a sort of business acquaintance of Mr. Dupont's, and Bond watches during the course of the morning Dupont and Goldfinger play. Bond suspects the way that Goldfinger is cheating from two things. One, whenever they play, Mr. Dupont has his back to the hotel because Goldfinger claims to have agoraphobia. The second thing is Goldfinger has an earpiece in I think it's his left ear, because he is allegedly hard of hearing. From these two pieces of information, Bond suspects the way Goldfinger is cheating is that he's got somebody in his hotel room with binoculars looking down at Mr. Dupont's card, and then he's radioing to the earpiece which cards Mr. Dupont has. And so at lunch, Bond tells Mr. Dupont that he thinks he knows the way how the Goldfinger's doing it, but he doesn't explain to him the full details because he's not absolutely certain, and says he will deal with the situation that afternoon, and so he has to be excused from not being present at the rest of the game. So that afternoon, Bond goes up to Goldfinger's room with a camera. He breaks in and finds that his suspicions are confirmed. Goldfinger's assistant, a young woman called Jill Masterson, is doing exactly what Bond thought. She's looking through a pair of binoculars at Dupont's cards and then radioing them through to Goldfinger on the earpiece. Bond talks with Masterson. It becomes clear that she has no real loyalty to Goldfinger, and she's only working with him to build up some money so that she can get away and find another job. This makes Bond's buggering up Goldfinger's situation easier because she doesn't stop Bond from radioing, talking to Goldfinger through the radio. Bond forces Goldfinger to return all the money that he'd effectively stolen from Mr. Dupont, give Bond $10,000 as an apology for him having to stop Goldfinger from cheating, as well as booking Bond booking Bond a place on a sleeper train up to New York, as well as allowing Jill Masterson to go with him. Goldfinger does this, and then Bond and Jill Masterson leave on the train. Whilst on the journey up to New York, they have a fling, and at the end of it, Bond gives Jill Masterson the £10,000, at which point Bond catches his flight to London and thinks no more of Goldfinger. Then about 3 weeks later, Bond is doing a stint of duty as a night duty officer at headquarters. Bond initially doesn't like this duty, but then after a day, he finds he actually does enjoy it and finds the work fulfilling. And so he comes off his shift and he's getting ready to go home. Then M appears, an half an hour earlier than he usually would at HQ, and calls for Bond to see him. M tells Bond he has a mission for him, and it is to go up against Goldfinger. M has been contacted by the Bank of England, who greatly suspect, but they cannot prove, that Goldfinger is smuggling a huge amount of gold out of the UK to India, where it can be sold at a huge profit. This is damaging the country's economy, and so the Secret Service have been asked to come in on this. However, the Secret Service itself have an interest in Goldfinger now, because he had a Soviet connection. The way that the Bank of England know that Goldfinger is smuggling gold is because when on his gold bars that he creates himself, they are almost unidentifiable, except for under a microscope, somewhere on the gold bar will be a small Z, which is Goldfinger's mark to say that this is his. Now, sometime before being contacted by the Bank of England, MI6 found a cache of Soviet gold which was being used to supply Smersh's operations, and they found the telltale microscopic Z on these bars. And so MI6 are now convinced that Goldfinger is acting as Smersh's sort of chief treasurer and fundraiser. And so Bond's job is to, one, stop him smuggling the gold, and two, capture him, so this will completely bugger up Smersh's operations. So Bond is given the mission, and he's sent to go and investigate Goldfinger's setup down on the coast. Bond remembers that when he was talking with Goldfinger in Miami, they spoke about golf, and Goldfinger held out an offer to play a game of golf with him at his local golf course, which is St Mark's Royal. Marks and Royal, I think it is. Royal St Mark's, sorry. That's it. And so Bond decides he's going to engineer a meeting between them at Royal St Mark and play that game of golf, and use this to try and get it into Goldfinger's operation. However, before he does this, he has to look around the area that Goldfinger is living in, and then he goes to the golf club and engineers this meeting with Goldfinger, and they do in fact play a game of golf. During the game of golf, Goldfinger cheats. However, Bond at the end of it cheats and wins the game, and Goldfinger had bet Bond £10,000 as a way of trying to get him back for the loss of money in Miami. This means Bond wins again. However, Bond thinks this is a good thing because he's roughly got the measure of Goldfinger, believing that Goldfinger will regard this as not regard this as a defeat, but an interesting one, because it will show Bond is a man of ability, and therefore more likely to make Goldfinger see him as a possible ally or recruit. And this in fact does happen, because Goldfinger offers Bond an invitation to dinner, which Bond accepts, and he goes to Goldfinger's house. When Bond turns up, Goldfinger has to leave for half an hour because one of his people, Goldfinger has a small group of sort of loyal staff who are mostly Koreans, but there are some Germans, and one of the Koreans has got in trouble with the police. And so Goldfinger and his chauffeur, bodyguard and general right-hand man, Oddjob, one of the Koreans, go off to get this worker out of trouble. Whilst Goldfinger is gone, Bond has a look around Goldfinger's house and has a look at the factory which is on Goldfinger's estate, which is clearly being used to turn the gold that Goldfinger gets into these empty bars, or some other way that Goldfinger uses it, melted it down so that Goldfinger can get it out of the country. Now, one thing I should point out this one: Goldfinger's car is a silver Ghost Rolls Royce, which has yellow panelling and was originally meant for a South American dictator, and so it's armoured. Keep a note on that for what, because that will become important in a moment. However, so Bond is looking around Goldfinger's house and the factory, and then as he's looking at the end, near the end of the time, when he knows Goldfinger's going to come back, Bond notices that finds in a bedroom a recording system for film, and Bond has noticed there's all lights are in the house, lights are on in the house, and clearly that's because Goldfinger wanted to catch Bond in the act. However, Bond is able to stop this because the place that Bond has found this recording equipment is where all the camera film is coming, where all the film is coming into, and so he leaves the door ajar open and puts a cat, which is in the house, in there to sort of ruin it, which it successfully does. And so when the Goldfinger and Oddjob return, the camera film has been completely ruined. However, Goldfinger does know, or should I say, does greatly suspect that Bond has been sniffing about. To sort of show this to Bond, Goldfinger first introduces Oddjob to Bond, and through a sort of bit of use of karate, shows how completely formidable Oddjob is. Bond is convinced that in a one-to-one fight with Oddjob, he really wouldn't be able to win. The second thing that Goldfinger sort of is able to sort of say to Bond, "Look, I know what you've done," is that he brings out the cat and gives it to Oddjob to eat. And effectively, he's effectively telling Bond, "I can't punish you, so I'm going to punish the cat instead." Then Bond and Goldfinger have dinner, of which Bond uses the mission in Mexico as cover to extend his sort of cover and sort of entice Goldfinger further into recruiting him by saying he was involved in the drug smuggling ring and that he got out when it got attacked and it got rolled up. Then Bond leaves and learns that Goldfinger is going to be travelling to the continent, so he puts a homer on Goldfinger's rolls, a homing device, I should say. But as he's doing this in the custom show, he notices there's a Triumph there, but he thinks nothing of it. And so Goldfinger leaves for the continent, lands in France. Bond follows him and starts following Goldfinger through France towards Switzerland. Whilst he's there, he starts noticing that the Triumph is there, and it's being driven by a woman. He thinks this is quite suspicious, but doesn't think of much of it to begin with. During the journey, Goldfinger stops by a bridge near Lyon and has lunch, and then he goes under the bridge and he's there for a few minutes, then comes back and drives off. Bond investigates and finds a dead letterbox under the bridge with a gold bar in. And so Bond puts two and two together and works out this is a local drop to fund local communists. Bond collects the gold bar and continues on after Goldfinger. He then notices that the girl is still following him and decides he's got to put a stop to this. So he accidentally, on purpose, rear-ends the girl's Triumph, which puts it out of action, and he agrees to take her to Switzerland, which he does, and drops her off at a hotel. He assumes this is going to be the end of her sort of whatever she has going on with Goldfinger. That's put into it. Anyway, so Bond goes to investigate Goldfinger's setup in Switzerland, which is named Enterprises Ulrich, and also Ulrich, Goldfinger's house nearby. And while spying on the house, he sees Goldfinger's silver Ghost Rolls Royce having the panelwork taken off, and instead of it being the normal seal, it is white. And so Bond finally works out how Goldfinger is getting the gold out of the UK. It's in the panelwork, and because obviously everybody knows the Rolls Royce is armoured, nobody thinks anything about the weight. So anyway, so Bond decides, right, that's how Goldfinger's doing it, but he wonders how he's getting it to out of Switzerland. So he goes to the local MI6 office and drops off the gold bar and tells them about the drop off and asks them about what Enterprises Ulrich does. And Bond discovers from this that one of the main clients of Enterprises Ulrich is a Indian airline which Ulrich Goldfinger owns shares in, and Enterprises Ulrich supplies them with metal chairs for inside the plane. And so Bond works out that what Goldfinger is doing is, once the gold panel work is taken out of the car, it's being melted down and moulded into a chair, which is then put on the plane. When it gets to India, the gold chairs are taken out, replaced with actual proper chairs, and then that gold is melted down and sold off at a huge profit in India. This sort of gives Bond all the necessary information he needs, but he passes this on to the MI6 man, but he decides he wants to have another final look around Goldfinger's business to see if he can get any little bit else information. So that night he goes to have a look around, and he sees that the girl, whose name is Tilly, the one who was at the Triumph, is there, and she's got a rifle, and she's clearly going to try and kill Goldfinger. Bond stops her, and after assuring her he's not going to harm her, she explains to him that she's Jill Masterson's sister, and that Goldfinger, after what Bond did in Miami, had Jill Masterson killed by painting her whole body in gold and suffocating her to death. This sort of weighs on Bond because he feels somewhat responsible for her death, and as he and Tilly are planning to leave the area, they're stopped as Oddjob fires an arrow at them, and they're then frog marched into Goldfinger's house. It's into the factory, where Goldfinger ties Tilly to a chair and puts Bond on a workbench with a circular saw at the other end of it. And Goldfinger says he's going to kill Bond and Tilly, but he wants Bond to confess to who he's working for. And so Goldfinger sets the circular saw coming towards Bond, and Bond sort of refuses to say, but tries to convince Goldfinger to recruit them instead of killing them. But Bond thinks that Goldfinger isn't going to do that, and so he tries to sort of force himself to suffocate himself by holding his breath. Unfortunately, Bond doesn't succeed, and he passes out. However, when Bond reawakes, he's on a hospital gurney in New York, along with Tilly Masterson, and he finds that under the cover that Bond is a assistant of his that has gone mad, Goldfinger is allegedly getting him to see a specialist in New York at a hospital. However, the reality is that Goldfinger is simply smuggling Bond and Tilly into New York so he can carry on with some plan of his. Now, once they're in Goldfinger's hideout in New York, which is a factory on the waterfront, Bond discovers that Goldfinger was actually convinced by his suggestion that he and Tilly should work for Goldfinger, and now Goldfinger wants to use Bond and Tilly as secretaries. And Bond and Tilly decide to agree, because the only way they're going to escape is if they live and as long as they're working for Goldfinger, he's not going to kill them. And so Bond and Tilly start working for Goldfinger as a secretary. They then discover what Goldfinger's ultimate plan in the United States is. He has a meeting with six six gangsters. Among them are Helmut Springer, I think that's his name. He was a representative of the Chicago mob, and also a lesbian burglar gang leader called Pussy Galore. Goldfinger tells them that his plan is to rob Fort Knox, and they will each get $1 billion, and he will get $15 billion out of it in gold. They're a bit unconvinced by this, as you can imagine, but then he sets out his plan, which includes gassing the entire population of Fort Knox and the surrounding area, to make it look like there's some outbreak of some disease. He tells the gangsters that it is going to be sort of just knockout gas that will put them out for a couple of hours. Well, yeah. And in the meantime, he and they, and each of them will bring 100 men with them, will enter the area as a medical task force, and then they will rob Fort Knox. And the way they will rob it is that Goldfinger has acquired from a NATO base in, I think it's West Germany, a clean atomic bomb, and he's going to use that to blow his way into the Fort Knox and then get the gold out. Being a clean bomb, the fallout is very, very limited, and so it won't irradiate the gold. All but the representative of the Chicago mob agree to take part, and so when he leaves, Goldfinger has Objob kill him and his assistant. I should say all the 6 gangsters who arrived each brought an assistant with them who were outside the room when the proposal was being made. Goldfinger informs this of the other 5, and he asks if there's going to be any comeback, and they all say no, because the Chicago mob were frankly getting fed up of him, and they were going to put out a hit on him anyway, so he's actually done the Chicago mob a service. After this meeting, Bond and Tilly are sort of heavily involved in the paperwork, and Goldfinger takes Bond into his confidence, and during this, Bond learns that the gas that's going to be the knockout gas isn't actually it isn't knockout gas. It is a knockout thing, but it's not gas. Sorry, it's going to be in the water supply, and that's what's going to do it. However, Bond is informed by Goldfinger that it's not going to knock them out; it's going to kill them all. But he says he didn't want to tell that to the others because of the effect it will have on. That may scare them off. At this point, Bond decides he's got to do something. He's got to get a message out, and so he types up a message which he hides on himself, which he sellotapes to his shin, and then he tries to work out a way to get it out. The letter is to Felix Leiter at the Pinkerton Agency. Felix Leiter is stationed in New York, and it sets out everything. It sets out all of Goldfinger's plan. And so Bond is going to trying to work out how to get out. Bond gets his opportunity when Goldfinger and the 5 gangsters go on a reconnaissance flight over Fort Knox under the cover of being a scouting crew for a Hollywood film. Bond is taken by Goldfinger as sort of secretary, and sort of because he's taken Bond into his confidence, he wants him to be there to look at things. And Bond uses this as a way to get the message out, because he hides the message under the rim of the toilet seat on the plane. Then the flight lands after successfully giving the overall look, and they return back to New York. Throughout the next 3 days, Bond is constantly worried that whether his message has got through to Leiter or not, or if it has got through to the Pinkertons, that Leiter has actually got it, or it's got to somebody else, or all sorts of other things of, if anything, everything might have gone wrong, and Goldfinger's plan might succeed. So on the day itself they all travel down to Fort Knox on a train. They are successful in using their disguise as a medical reinforcement team. I should say the way that the gold is going to be gotten out is that the other 5 gangsters are going to use trucks and large heavy vehicles. Goldfinger is going to use a train. And so they all go down to Fort Knox, and when they arrive they see bodies lying everywhere, and Bond is convinced that the water supply, the poison has been put in the water supply, and they are dead. And so the whole of this Goldfinger and his allies forces get into Fort Knox. They get up to the Fort Knox depository itself, and they're about to plant the clean atomic bomb to blow the way in. At which point, all hell breaks loose because Bond's message has in fact got through, and everybody who were there, both civilians and the troops that are stationed there, are playing dead. They all get up and they open fire, and they stop the atom bomb being blown up, and they start around attacking the Goldfinger and his allies. Goldfinger and the 5 gangsters get away. Bond is able to escape and tries to get Tilly to go with him. However, Tilly, who has become has taken a shine to Pussy Galore, wants to go with her, feeling that she's going to be safe with her, and in the process, Oddjob, who's chasing them, throws his legendary bowler hat with the sharpened rim at Tilly and gets her in the nape of the neck. Oddjob, however, escapes and doesn't get to Bond. What follows is Bond is the clean-up of the situation. Bond has meetings with J. Edgar Hoover and also with the US President, who was actually personally oversaw the operations, which makes me think that the President in here is meant to be Dwight D. Eisenhower. And Bond discovers that Bond's message didn't reach Leiter until 2 days after he put it in there, because because the plane wasn't cleaned up, it wasn't given the once-over in cleaning. However, when it was, there was a mad rush, and obviously successfully, the US authorities got things in place, and so the thing was sort of smashed. However, Goldfinger and the 5 gangsters have disappeared, and whilst on, though all the other side of things have been quite successfully sort of rolled up, Goldfinger's operations in the UK and in Switzerland have been closed down, and so Goldfinger is now a wanted man, even though he's at large. And so a couple of days later, Bond is being driven. He's taken up to New York and then driven by Felix Leiter to the Idlewild Airport, where he's going to catch his BOAC flight to London. Whilst he's waiting for his flight, he discovers, thanks to the BOA staff, that there's been a outbreak of a contagious disease in one of the places where they've got to stop on the way to London, and Bond hasn't got his requisite shots. Bond is sort of very irritated by this, but when he sees that the rest of the passengers have gone and finds out that they have gone to get their shots as well, he just agrees to it and goes along. When Bond has his shots, he passes out. He then wakes up sometime later to find himself on the BOAC plane, but which has been hijacked by Goldfinger, his remaining loyal forces of a handful of men and Oddjob, as well as Pussy Galore. Whilst on the flight, Bond and Goldfinger talk, where Goldfinger explains how he escaped, that he got away with the 5 gangsters and then he killed the other 4, keeping Pussy Galore alive, whilst telling the other men that was telling the 5 gangsters the 4 gangsters now dead, their men, that they disappeared and gone off, which means that he's able to escape without detection from them. Goldfinger has lost the gold that he was trying to get. Still has his gold, and he's now flying using the BAC plane directly to the Eastern Bloc. He's either going to land in Berlin, Murmansk, Kiev, or I think Moscow. No, it wouldn't Moscow. It was either Kiev or one of those 2 places. Sorry, one of the 3. And Goldfinger also now knows who Bond is and knows that his previous run-ins with Smersh, and so he's going to take Bond back with him to the Soviet Union to be interrogated. During this conversation, Bond has been given something to eat and something to drink, and in the coaster under his drink, he sees there's writing from Pussy Galore saying that she's switched sides and she's now on his side and he's willing to help him. And so Bond works out a way of bringing the plane down without killing them all. However, he's got to be careful because Oddjob is watching him. The way Bond does this is he has a knife which he's got secretly hidden on him, and he throws it at one of the windows of the plane, breaking it, which sort of causes stuff to sort of go out, be pulled out of the plane due to the difference in a sort of pressure, including odd job, and then causes the plane to start to lose altitude. This successfully sort of knocks things, causes sort of a complete disarrange of the plane, and Bond is able to then kill Goldfinger with his bare hands. After this, he then goes up to the cabin with Goldfinger's gun, as well as another gun he's picked up off a dead one of Goldfinger's dead men, who he's been able to kill with Goldfinger's own gun, and he under with a gun pointing at them, he is able to contact the Canadian air authorities and find a way to crash the plane in water, at sea, and get them and get everybody to safety. During this, this is successful, and they get rescued by the Canadian authorities. During which Bond he gets close to Pussy Galore. Well, I say gets close; it's only very short time, but they become friends, and then closer than that. And the Bond ends with the book ends with Bond in bed with Pussy Galore. Now, overall, I really enjoyed this book. A lot of action, really interesting plot. The fact that Bond is going up against Smersh again, which is something I really enjoy whenever Bond does. I think the Bond books are at his best when these are Cold War adventures, fighting off against the Soviets, and certainly this is one of them. The manner in which Goldfinger goes about his operations is really interesting. The fact that his cover and the way he's made his millions is through pawn shops up across the UK, and the fact that he entered the UK as a Latvian immigrant in the late 30s. Having had in the book, he suggested he had sort of an idea that the Soviets might be going to invade, and then it turns out he was in fact sent in as a deep cover agent by Smersh. And the sort of the slow introduction to Goldfinger, both first as initially just an unpleasant rich man, and then as a solid agent, is really well done. And Goldfinger himself is, like many of Fleming's best villains, not a shrieking maniac, with the exception of Sir Hugo Drax, who does show himself to be a shrieking maniac. But Goldfinger, like Mr. Big, and to really like Dr. No, the villain in the previous book, he's very calm, he's very collected, he's deeply intelligent. Like Mr. Big, Goldfinger is a man who Bond unironically and genuinely regards as a genius, even if he is an evil one. And Bond even says that if Goldfinger wasn't evil, hadn't gone bad, or wasn't bad, he would actually respect him more than he already does as an opponent. There's a lot of, as I say, there's a lot of action, a lot of movement across, whether you're talking about the movement from New York, from Miami to New York, the sort of following Bond following Goldfinger from the UK into Switzerland. The fight in Fort Knox, and then the final sort of confrontation with Goldfinger on the plane are all really well done. Fleming, as ever, does action really well. Now, the Goldfinger's plot is somewhat preposterous. The idea that you could get, let's think, so it's going to be $20 billion in gold bars out of Fort Knox on a train, and then on a huge number of trucks is improbable. In this, I would say that the film improves on the plot, because in the film, Goldfinger's plot is to set off a dirty nuclear bomb at Fort Knox, thereby raising the gold prices, thereby making himself richer. And that would have been a more that makes more sense. It's more practicable than Goldfinger's plot here. Nevertheless, Goldfinger setting out the plot in this conference he has with the gangsters is really well done, and is really entertaining. There's also very sort of callbacks in this book to previous Bond stories, obviously Casino Royale with Mr. DuPont, references in it to I think that obviously, actually, yeah, sorry, I just remembered. One of the callbacks is to Diamonds Are Forever, where the Spang Gang is among the new head of the Spang Gang is one of the 5 gangsters who agrees to take part in Goldfinger's operation, and then there are there's sort of references here and there to a few of the different Bond adventures before. And obviously, it's nice to see Felix Leiter back. Felix Leiter is a very nice, really well done character in this. And in fact, with all the Bond books that he appears in, it's always nice to see him there. And there's also one thing I've noticed with the other Fleming books, a reference to the Second World War. That the war as, but I found it with this one, and particularly with From Russia with Love, that the sort of war was an underlying element to the book. Now, I found this, as I say, I found this really enjoyable. I'd recommend anybody to read it. The Pussy Galore bit at the end is a bit odd. She's a lesbian, but then Bond is able to turn her, which is a fantasy, frankly, preposterous. There is, however, an interesting bit that Tilly Masterson is actually a lesbian as well, and the fact that she feels attracted to Pussy Galore is why she tries to go to her, and then that gets her killed, which is interesting. And I think that's actually probably quite realistic, which is somewhat unusual to say, given the fact that Pussy Galore gets turned to heterosexuality at the end of the book. However, modern critics who usually criticise that are people who believe in gender fluidity and sexuality fluidity. Sort of people who believe that there is such a thing as trans women being lesbians, for example. So, as funny as Fleming's criticisms, as funny as Fleming's sort of turning Pussy Galore straight through to Bond's magnetism, it's nowhere near as preposterous as some of the stuff people will criticise Fleming for writing that think today. So, but as I say, overall enjoyed it. Felt it was good. Plot of it, Goldfinger's plot a bit preposterous, but the explanation of it's really entertainingly good. Goldfinger himself, great villain. And you do get one thing that you do get, which is sort of continuation through the books, is Bond's, particularly at the beginning when he's discussing the Mexican drug smuggling operation. The Bond questions some things he has to do in his job. The reason why he has a sour taste in his mouth from that operation is because he had to kill a man in cold blood. And Bond's not entirely comfortable with that. I mentioning that, I've just remembered something else I wanted to mention, which is that you get a reference to what the reason why Bond's sent on that mission is because this is a little known fact that people are not. I don't think people are aware of today in the UK, is that up until the 1950s, heroin was legal in Britain. However, under pressure from the United States and the UN, the United States isn't mentioned in this, but I know from the history it was the United States pushing the UN to do this. Heroin was actually made illegal in Britain. And this caused quite a significant trouble for legal drug users in Britain. And Fleming points this out. And it's quite clear when Fleming's talking about this that he does not approve of this at all. One of his quotes in here is that prohibition is the trigger of crime. So it's interesting that Fleming was not in favour of drug prohibition, at least in this case, which given the sort of stereotype people have of Ian Fleming being this sort of conservative reactionary figure, sort of seeing would seem to people who aren't as well versed in the era and sort of attitudes towards drugs at the time rather odd. I personally didn't, because I've got some sort of interest in the history of that. But I did actually find it quite nice that on this issue that Ian Fleming was by modern standards quite liberal, which was an interesting fact to discover. I genuinely didn't remember that from last time I read it, so that was a nice thing to discover. But with that, I will say Goodbye, Booktube, and I will see you later.